Welcome to the pilot episode of my new show, Your Football Opinion, with Theo Ash. This will be a very simple show. It's just me talking about the NFL. I will bring on guests. We will talk about the NFL. You are probably familiar with this format. A lot of football content is like this. I imagine a lot of you listening are already familiar with me and my work on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitter, on the Stay Hot podcast. If so, thank you for listening. This show would not exist without you guys. And if this is the first you're hearing of me, allow me to introduce myself. Hello, I am Theo Ash. My story is basically that I got big on TikTok during the pandemic. Some of my early hits, I had beef with Larry Fitzgerald's legacy. I had a video disproving the more tackles than drops stat. I got into a fight with Barstool Ohio State about the caliber of Justin Fields as a prospect, which led to me getting into a fight with Dave Portnoy after kind of a strange chain of events. I made a video about a tell in Ben Roethlisberger's footwork that let you know if it was a run or a pass. I think all those videos are especially distinctive in my career, but I have made all kinds of content on TikTok, lots of quick film reviews on different players or plays. I've made lists, I've made rankings, I've made a lot of predictions, had various agendas on various different players, some of which have gained me some notoriety. I've been a fierce soldier here in the Tua Tagovailoa versus Justin Herbert debate. I said the Bengals would win 2 games the year they went to the Super Bowl. I blame Twitter user Betts for being a negative influence on me in that year. I said that Zach Wilson would be a bust. I said the Packers, they got a star in Jordan Love. So over the last 4 years, I have been right and I have been wrong, but I have always been thorough enough in my reasoning that people watch. I guess they want to hear more. And I've been able to grow a platform despite my lack of real football background. What is my background? I was a sports journalism student at Arizona State. A lot of people ask me how to break into the industry or how I got my start. I would say that's kind of where it all began. That's a great program if you want to get into it. But I hardly wrote any stories. Like during my sophomore year, it was COVID. So I had a bunch of free time. And that's when I started posting my opinions on TikTok. The account got big. Me and my friends got a podcast deal. I dropped out of Cronkite. So I never actually got a degree from there. And then I've been making content ever since. What I've learned over this time is that I think it's a good idea to just stay focused on the football. You know, my theory is the way I'll be able to sustain my career is I have to learn as much about the game as I can, and eventually I'll be able to justify my own existence as an analyst. And when I started, really the only edge that I had was that I knew about advanced analytics. As a kid, I got the Football Outsiders Almanac, which was big for me. That was very big. So all my early takes were deeply rooted in the analytics. My opinions on players were determined by certain metrics that I liked, which is honestly not the worst way to do things. But I think that being a spreadsheet watcher is not as useful in football as it is in other sports. I don't think being a numbers guy lends itself as well to a game where there's only 17 weeks of a sample size, fewer possessions than in any other sport. It's the ultimate team game. So I realized that film content lended itself better to just knowing ball, obviously. And it also just lended itself better to TikTok and YouTube. So basically knowing nothing about film, I started talking about football, which a lot of people do. So I have no shame about doing that. But my intent has always been to get to the truth. I haven't completely sold out for views yet. I am earnestly attempting to learn as much as I can about the game so I can become as accurate as possible. But I do love a hot take. I cannot lie. So that might always prevent me from being the most accurate guy out there. There are a lot of other good football creators out there, ones who are better than me at this, at least at the moment they are, who over the years I've watched and I've listened to their work, and it's helped me get better. It's helped me get so much smarter. So many people I have respect for. And I want as many of those people as possible to be on this show as guests. And the plan for now, there will be segments of the show where it's just me talking. And then there will be segments of the show where it's me and a guest. I do have a guest today. Nate Tice is going to join me for the second part of this episode. We're going to talk about some dark horse Super Bowl contenders. And the other thing I want to do, and the other people that I want to incorporate in this show, is the listeners. You know, your football opinion with Theo Ash has to do with the fact that I want people to call in and argue with me, give takes to me. I love the local radio part of the night when some fan base has just suffered a brutal L and people call and just vent. I want there to be a little bit of this or a little bit of that on this show. And then I have another goal. I want to talk about teams that aren't getting a lot of attention from other media places. You know, when the Panthers are 3-7 in November, I still want to find an angle that is interesting, and I want to find time to talk about them. I don't want the show to be about what the Cowboys and the Chiefs and the Eagles are doing every single week. By the end of the season, I want every fan base to be able to say they've heard multiple segments about their team on this show. Although I will, of course, still talk about the contenders. Maybe even I will do that today exclusively. So sorry, Panthers fans, nothing on you guys today. And I think that's all the explanation about this show that I want to give. It's pretty straightforward. And I think I'd rather talk about, and you'd all rather hear about, the football. In this inaugural episode, I want to figure out just what is the best team in each conference. This is also known as a Super Bowl prediction, as I figure the best AFC team will face off against the best NFC team in the big game. For this exercise, I went back and I looked at the history of teams playing on championship weekend. And I realized that there really just isn't a ton of turnover at the top of the league year to year. You know, there was a time when just 3 teams had a monopoly on the AFC championship game. From 2001 to 2018, 36 teams played in the AFC championship round. 24 of those teams were quarterbacked by Big Ben, Tom Brady, or Peyton Manning. That's exactly 2/3 of the time. These days, the playoff rivalries don't seem to be as much about the quarterbacks as they do about the play callers. Since 2018, there have been 12 teams to play in the NFC championship game. 8 of those 12 teams have been coached by Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, or Matt LaFleur. That's exactly 2/3. That's the exact same percentage as the AFC quarterbacks of the previous era. So I think play callers seem to matter just as much as quarterbacks these days. You can't have Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson and expect to make it big. You need Jalen Hurts and Shane Steichen. You can't go to the AFC championship game with Lamar Jackson and Greg Roman. Seems like you need Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken. Meanwhile, McVay and Shanahan can go to the Super Bowl with multiple different quarterbacks. LaFleur can lose in the divisional round to the 49ers with multiple different quarterbacks. And people always ask, you know, is Mahomes versus Lamar the new Manning Brady? Is Mahomes versus Burrow the Manning Brady? Is Mahomes versus Allen the new Manning Brady? I think the real, most accurate new Manning Brady is like Kyle Shanahan versus Sean McVay. And I guess LaFleur is Big Ben in this comparison. So to be the best in the conference, you need that elite coordinator. And I'm also looking for a great quarterback and a fierce pass rush. Those are the main pieces of the formula that I'm considering when I pick a conference favorite. Although there are unfortunately several teams in each conference that have all of these things. So picking a winner won't be easy, but I do have my opinions. So we're going to give it a shot. I'm going to start with the NFC because I think my take here is more shocking and I don't want to bury the lead. My favorite team in this conference right now is the Green Bay Packers. I think they are poised to make a run. I don't think it's too early or too soon to say. It's always mentioned how eerily the Jordan Love transition resembles the beginning of Aaron Rodgers' career. And I think it's even more eerie when you realize that Brian Gutekunst has really closely replicated the entire 2010 roster. They've got a quarterback on the brink of being elite. They've got a deep group of pass catchers. In 2010, they had just spent a first-round pick on Brian Bulaga. Their best players on defense back in 2010 were at outside linebacker, corner, safety. The special teams the year before had been a disaster. And they were trendy Super Bowl picks, but they were one of the youngest teams in the league. So it does feel very similar the last time the Packers won a Super Bowl to right now. But that kind of success will only happen if Love takes another step instead of regressing, of course. And that is the thing that has a lot of people split. But I really think it is a good idea to bet on the former, because I was a Jordan Love believer before his mid-season turnaround last year. Last offseason, when I went over his brief stints of playing time, I saw what I needed to see. I saw anticipation. I saw fearlessness over the middle of the field. He was finding the right read pre-snap and post-snap. There was a game against the Eagles where this really all stood out. He entered for an injured Aaron Rodgers and played fantastic. And not just some 50-50 balls went his way. Someone was wide open off play action and he hit it. He was hitting the top of his drop. His back foot was hitting the ground, and he was making layered throws over the linebackers in front of the safeties. He was throwing with anticipation, timing. He was reading the leverage of defensive backs downfield and placing the ball accordingly. His time to throw didn't look like the bust quarterbacks. It's not like he was just getting the ball and turning his back to the defense and scrambling until he threw it. Like, Justin Fields did a little bit too much of that. Zach Wilson did a little bit too much of that. Even when Love came in back in 2021 as the emergency starter against the Chiefs, when Rodgers said he was immunized and ended up not being vaccinated. So he was thrown in against Spags. They were just heating him up more than Spags had heated anybody up all year. And in that game, Love didn't play great, but at least he was just hitting the top of his drop, seeing that Devontae Adams was one-on-one and throwing it. Like, I was like, okay, at least I can understand his process. And when you watched that, and then you watched the preseason games and a couple more of his brief stints of playing time, you could see that he was legitimately developing on the bench. Obviously, the sample sizes were small, but he was doing things that weren't normal by the end of it. So I didn't think Love was completely unproven going into last season, which is why now I'm really not concerned about the second half of the year being a fluke, because that's kind of what I expected. And his 2023 highs were even higher. I saw him look off defenders with his eyes and throw bombs. He did it in the very first game of the season against Chicago. He had 2 crossers over the middle of the field. He moved on from the first read. His eyes moved to the dig route behind the crosser. Tremaine Edmonds was reading Jordan Love's eyes as the hook defender. He fell off the first crosser to sink into that second throwing lane. And then Jordan Love threw it back to the first read in the opposite seam with his eyes on the second read. I saw him at the end of the year diagnose the defense pre-snap. He saw Dallas creeping forward, knew it was going to be an all-out blitz. He adjusted the protection. He hung in the pocket against the heavy pressure and scored a touchdown off the audible. He uses his ability to throw off of his back foot as a weapon because he doesn't need to take the time to step into the throw, really. His arm is that good. He can kind of take that extra second to read the field instead of stepping up. And interior pressure doesn't affect him as much as other quarterbacks because he's so comfortable fading away. And this is the case of the film and the stats really nicely aligning because Love's overall totals ended up being very impressive. He scored 39 touchdowns through the air and on the ground, and he threw for over 4,000 yards. But what's really tantalizing is the way he closed the year, not so much the way he began it. From week 10 and on, Love had 25 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, and he took only 12 sacks, which gave him the best pressure to sack rate in the league the back half of the season. He was number 1 in passing EPA. And Green Bay was able to beat 3 main contenders, the Lions, the Chiefs, and the Cowboys, and also the Bears. And the Bears weren't exactly a powerhouse, but their defense was playing at an elite level towards the end of last season. And the Packers needed to beat them to get into the playoffs. So this was an elimination game for Jordan Love against good competition, at least on that side of the ball. And he was 27 for 32 for 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. The week after that, he faced Dallas. He was 16 of 21 for 272 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The Packers offense scored a touchdown on 6 of the first 7 drives of that Dallas games. It was really one of the greatest playoff performances of all time. The advanced metrics from this game are absolutely jaw-dropping. He averaged 13 yards per attempt. He set the playoff record in expected points added per attempt at 1.13, meaning every time Jordan Love dropped back, he was adding the value of about a point to the Packers' score because of how they would move down the field. And it was also the greatest DVOA game in Green Bay Packers history. So based on the traits I had been seeing on film, combined with the tear he was on at the end of last year, I really have no doubts about Love in 2024, and I think he could be a main MVP candidate. But it's honestly fair if you want to see more. I mean, regression is possible. I have been cherry picking my games and my stats since week 10 looks great. But sadly, I cannot lie, there were weeks 1 through 9. That did happen. And over that time, Jordan Love's completion percentage was sub 60. His success rate was at 42.4%, which was the same as Sam Howell and Mac Jones. The first half of the season was rough. And specifically, the first halves of games in the first half of the season was rough. The Packers offense was a mess at the beginning of everything. But because they were the youngest team in the league last year, I see it as forgivable. And I do think it's easy to explain away. And I think going forward, it's more likely than not that it just becomes smoother. And this is where Matt LaFleur really enters the equation. Under a lesser coach, I would find it a lot more likely that Love falls back into his old bad habits. But like I said earlier, I think these Shanahan tree guys are the new Brady, Manning, Roethlisberger, Breeze, Rodgers of the league. I think these guys are capable of incredible feats. McVay resurrecting Jared Goff after a historically bad rookie year, setting offensive records with him. Then he flipped Goff for Matthew Stafford. Together they won a ring, and they turned Cooper Kupp into the greatest receiver ever, and Puka Nacua into the greatest rookie ever. And then Kyle Shanahan, he's elevated every single quarterback he's ever worked with to an insane degree. Now it's to the point where the last pick in the draft is a heavy hitter for the MVP. And Matt LaFleur got Aaron Rodgers on a sharp decline and immediately resurrected him to maybe the peak of his entire career. And now he has seemingly pulled off the perfect succession plan. And I'm thinking, why would I bet against any one of these guys to develop a quarterback fully? Why would I bet on regression when these franchises and these coaches have such a clear history of resounding success? One of my worst takes last season happened because I wasn't sold on Tua. So I thought Mike McDaniel wouldn't be able to sustain his historic offense. And then the Dolphins quickly dropped 70 points on the Broncos, shut my mouth right away. And by the end of the year, Tua led the league in passing yardage. And I still don't think Tua is quite as good as the numbers say. But with McDaniel, the offense certainly did not regress. So I'm thinking, why can't that be the Packers? Love is showing high-end traits on the mental side of the game as well as the physical side. We've seen him perform well in these elimination games against top 10 defenses. The receiving room is 5 deep with 2 good tight ends. When I hear cases against the Packers offense, a lot of the times the arguments revolve around the Packers having a lack of true stars at wide receiver. Some people are underwhelmed by Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, the 2 players they see as the top weapons on the team. But I still think this is a top tier skill position room, even without an all pro. Sure, Watson has been inconsistent. You can question Dobbs' upside, but then what about Jaden Reed? And what about Dontavion Wicks? They had fantastic rookie seasons. And this team was able to accomplish great things at the level they were at last year. And who's to say they can't develop further into elite players? Again, this was the youngest team in playoff history. And if you're a defensive coordinator prepping for the Packers, how can you effectively game plan when there really isn't anyone or anything to key in on? There's mismatches across the board. Wide receivers number 1 through 4, maybe even 5 and 6 in Green Bay. All could be positive on Sundays. And then leaving the realm of football for a second, I just saw, this is lofty, but I just saw the Boston Celtics win an NBA title, and everybody was betting against them because they didn't have the biggest stars in the finals. But with them, there was no weak links, so no one could really beat them. And I believe that's the type of environment that the Packers low-key have around Jordan Love, because they've also been an offensive line factory recently. David Bakhtiari never ended up getting healthy, but a 7th rounder, Rasheed Walker, was able to fill in nicely. Their right tackle is a former late round center draft pick, Zach Tom, and he's Pro Bowl level. They just spent another first round pick on a lineman, Jordan Morgan. He has the physical profile of someone who can cross train at different positions, which the Packers love to do. He's light on his feet. He plays with great balance. He'll probably take over the right guard spot. And the running back room has improved. Obviously, Aaron Jones was amazing in the playoffs, but he was hurt and on a pitch count all year. A.J. Dillon actually led this team in rushing attempts during the regular season. Now it's going to be Josh Jacobs. And the rookie, Marshawn Lloyd, is a great compliment to him. So they still have this thunder and lightning type duo that they had with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, but hopefully this time the duo won't be so one-sided in terms of talent. So the offense doesn't really have much I'm concerned about from top to bottom. I think that they're going to be able to match up with absolutely anybody. I haven't talked about the defense yet, and that is the side of the ball that always sells the Packers. Last year, 32.4 of their opponent drives ended in a punt. That was the second lowest rate in the league. They also had the second lowest interception rate. So this unit could just not get off the field. They could not force 3-and-outs or turnovers to give the ball back to the offense with great field position. I think it's fair to say they had the worst safety room in the league and the worst defensive coordinator, because Barry struggled at his previous stops. He was the DC for the 0-16 Lions. He was in Washington, and his defense finished ranked 28th in yards both years, and then he got fired. And then he benefited from coaching with the Rams because that made him more desirable as everybody was looking to snatch up the Vic Fangio tree. But just because he had the playbook, it didn't mean that he could coach at a high level. And I think replacing him is going to help them. They've made the switch from a 3-4 to a 4-3. What does that mean for the defense? Well, Rashawn Gary said it means hand in the dirt and not dropping back. It is that simple. And last year, Kingsley Enagbare and Preston Smith dropped into coverage on almost 10% of the reps. And Hafley will deliver what people have been asking for: more safety support in the box, less defensive linemen dropping back into coverage, a more penetrating downhill scheme with man coverage on the back end. I think the Packers have the personnel to play this way, because they were very disruptive, actually, rushing the passer last year. Top 10 in pressure rate. Over the last 3 years combined, Rashawn Gary specifically has a pressure rate of 18%. And over that time, there has only been one defensive lineman who disrupts the quarterback at a higher clip, and that is the absurd Micah Parsons at 21.2% pressure rate. Gary tore his ACL in 2022. That caused him to miss the final 8 games that year. It limited him to only playing 53% of the defensive snaps in 2023 after previously playing 70%. If he can get back to that 70% snap rate for a full season in the scheme, I believe he could be a Defensive Player of the Year type candidate. Alongside Gary, the Packers have Kenny Clark and Preston Smith, 2 proven commodities. And this is a unit that is deep as well. Kingsley Enagbare, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, Lucas Van Ness, they make up the second unit of this team. And those 4 combined for 141 pressures and 18.5 sacks last year. This is a talented front, and they're going to enjoy a substantial boost in talent from the secondary. Jair Alexander, he only played in 7 regular season games last year. Eric Stokes only played in 2. Their safety situation was atrocious last season, but they added Xavier McKinney to be their center fielder in the one high scheme. And then they drafted 3 other safeties to compete alongside of him, including Javon Bullard, who they drafted in the second round. They drafted linebacker Edgerrin Cooper in the second round. Between the shift in scheme and the infusion of talent into the secondary, I just think there is so much upside here. And I think overall there is a lot to like in every single unit. And overall, the reason that I like them more than the 49ers and the Lions is that I think all 3 of these teams were extremely even towards the end of last year. And I think the playoff results prove that. And I think more than the 49ers and more than the Lions, the Packers still have a bit more meat on the bone because of their youth, because of their depth, because of their potential. I think there is yet another gear that the Packers have that maybe Jared Goff and the Lions don't. And I think we may have just seen the best version of the 49ers that we're going to see. Not that they're not still extremely formidable, but I think they might not have the juice to keep up if the Packers take another step. So that's what I'm banking on. That's why I think Green Bay might actually be the sneaky team to beat of all the teams in this conference. Moving on to the AFC. I like a team that a lot of people have moved on from, the Baltimore Ravens. And I even agree with the idea that last year was their best chance to win it all. But even though they lost some pieces, that chance is not gone at all. Because last year they were so far in front of everybody else, they actually have the margin of error to fall off a little bit and still win the Super Bowl. Consider that they beat the Texans twice last season by a combined score of 59-19. They beat Detroit 38-6. They beat San Francisco 33-19. They beat Miami 56-19. They beat Cleveland 28-3. They destroyed some of these playoff teams. And overall, 10 of Baltimore's 13 wins came against teams with winning records, which is the most of all time. This team was dominant, and I think they're built to last. This wasn't just a one-year blip. And I know that because they have Lamar Jackson, who has a career winning percentage of 75.3%, which is just as high as Tom Brady's. So I'm not going to sit here and predict a quarterback like that to fall off. Lamar is one of the all-time greats. And if you're waiting for him to come crashing down to earth, you're going to be waiting a long time. Because to me, Lamar Jackson is like Matthew Stafford if Stafford was also the fastest player in the league. Like Jackson's poise and creativity within the pocket is off the charts good. And he, like Stafford, has that kind of signature sidearm release with a ton of zip. Lamar was amazing last year targeting the intermediate area of the field. He had an 11-0 touchdown to interception ratio in the 10 to 19 yard range, which to me is the hardest area to excel in because that's where I believe the windows are the tightest. You have to layer those passes over the linebackers and put them down in front of the safeties. On short passes, it's easy to be accurate. I think on deep passes, the wide receiver can bail you out a little bit because they have all the time that they need to adjust. Those intermediate throws are the real money shots, and no quarterback was better in that area than Jackson last season. He was the most consistent quarterback overall with no real disaster games, which is a big reason why he won MVP. He led the league in yards per carry again, and he led all quarterbacks in yardage on designed rushes. And he was the best quarterback in the league when his team was trailing, which I think is important because that's the time when everybody knows what you're going to do. Teams don't usually run themselves back into a game. People think Lamar Jackson had unimpressive numbers last year. To me, I don't think that could be farther from the truth. There is an elephant in the room, though, when it comes to Lamar Jackson, and that is the playoffs, where the Ravens have been underwhelming. There's no way to spin it. But allow me to try, because I think people are too overconfident saying that's the way it will always be. Because although Lamar's playoff numbers are bad right now, no doubt, it's probably not going to stay that way forever. When Jackson gets to the playoffs, multiple times now he's had a first round bye, which means he's gotten to skip the round where he would get the easiest wins and be able to pad his numbers a little bit. I think that's got to be taken into account. Right now, Jackson is 2-4 in the playoffs at age 27. Peyton Manning had the exact same record at this point in his career, and he was labeled just a regular season merchant, an MVP merchant, someone who can't actually get it done. But the best was yet to come. And at age 30, he won a ring. And I think regular season numbers are more predictive of future playoff performance than past playoff performance because of the sample size difference. AKA, I want the best regular season performers in the playoffs, basically, is what it comes down to. I think the best regular season players are just the best players most of the time. And playoffs are kind of playoffs, and weird things can happen. And although the Chiefs game was rough, Lamar was amazing against Houston. He absolutely dismantled D'Amico Ryan's blitz-heavy game plan. And I think in that game, he proved that, yeah, he can perform great in the playoffs. He can carry the team in the playoffs. And that Chiefs L, although he certainly didn't play very well and had maybe the worst throw of his career, it wasn't all on him. Zay Flowers fumbled at the 1-inch line in what ended up being a 1-score game. And the Ravens running backs only carried the ball 6 times for 23 yards. And I find it very easy to convince myself that things could be very different in a rematch, especially with Derrick Henry in the fold now. I think that Henry could have much more of an impact than people are imagining. He is the Tom Brady of running backs, still productive far, far past the threshold of carries that running backs tend to hit and slow down. Henry still posted an elite yards after contact number last year. He was at 3.32 yards after contact per carry. Christian McCaffrey was at 3.42. Kyron Williams was at 3.34. Jahmyr Gibbs was at 3.12. Bijan Robinson was at 3.1. So Henry was still an elite tackle breaking company. But now let's look at the yards before contact. Henry ranked 44th. On average, he only made it about 2 feet before getting hit behind an atrocious Tennessee offensive line. Last season, with Lamar drawing a lot of defensive attention, Baltimore ranked 2nd in yards before contact. 640. My bad. Last season, with Lamar drawing a ton of defensive attention, Baltimore ranked 2nd in yards before contact, and they had the lowest percentage of runs that lost yardage. So fade Henry at your own risk. I think he's set up to defy the odds once again and finish near the top of the league or at the top of the league in rushing yards. One thing that concerns me about the Ravens is that they're replacing a lot of their offensive line, but I think that Henry signing was a cheap way to help mitigate that issue because he can still create lots of yardage on his own. And I think just the mentality of having him will keep the Ravens from becoming one-dimensional like they were in the playoffs, relying largely on like Justice Hill. So with Henry and a healthier version of Mark Andrews, I think this offensive supporting cast is more than adequate for Lamar to cook again. I think he'll be in the MVP mix. I think he could win his 3rd. And hopefully this time around, they have a bit more firepower and catch a few more breaks in the postseason. And then this defense still looks very elite. This is the best secondary in football by far. By far. They're adding Nate Wiggins, who is a big draft crush of mine. He is one of the fastest corners ever, as evidenced by his 4.28 40. And he even pulled up lame during that run. And he was locked in man coverage most of the time at Clemson and shut everybody down. 99th percentile man coverage results for him, according to Pro Football Focus. He was my 12th overall prospect in the draft. He fell all the way to 30th. I saw the Giants big board on Hard Knocks designate him with a character red flag. I heard, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I heard that he was vaping during some of the combine meetings. And I also, well, he said himself, I know this from interviews, that he wasn't always locked into practice at Clemson, especially early in his career. But turn on the tape, look at the results. It's tough for me to care what he was doing in practice if that's the way he goes out there and performs. So he could be another star alongside Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Marcus Williams, Marlon Humphrey. Even Brandon Stevens played great last year. So it's going to be so difficult, once again, to pass the ball on this Ravens team with those coverage bodies back there. Again, I don't think there's another team that comes close to the sheer amount of talent in the secondary that the Ravens have got. And even though Mike Macdonald is gone, it's pretty easy to be a great coach with great talent. And this defense has great talent. Macdonald came from developing within their building. Zach Orr is doing the same thing. He knows what they did last year. And I think he's going to be able to replicate it pretty closely. Justin Madubuike, I don't think he's forgotten how to rush the passer now that Macdonald is gone. I don't think Michael Pierce has forgotten how to stuff the run. Roquan Smith is a coach on the field. And as long as he's out there, I think this defense will be right. I think this defense will be right in a big way. Obviously, though, the Chiefs are still there. They're still great, and it's tempting to just continue to pick them over and over and over again. You'll be right more times than not. And the thing and I think that they're built so well this year, but I just can't totally get past the fact that we've never seen a three-peat before. And everybody just seems so confident right now that it'll happen. They'll just waltz in and do what they always do. But, a lot of their stars are a bit on the older side. Travis Kelce, before the playoffs last year, was certainly showing some signs of slowing down. And now he's entering his age 35 season. And after trading L'Jarius Sneed away, I think it's safe to say that this defense does not quite measure up to the Ravens on paper. And there's a lot of question marks in that secondary outside of Trent McDuffie. I think the average fan would say that last year proved Lamar and the Ravens simply don't have what it takes to make it past Kansas City at all. It can never happen. And I resent that. And I think that the combination of Lamar and this defense gives the Ravens a wide open Super Bowl window. And this year, I'm picking them to do it. Ravens versus Packers in New Orleans. The Ravens win. That's my big prediction. We'll see how it goes. And this is a lot shorter than the Packers segment, but I think it's a lot easier to justify the Ravens being good considering how good they were last year. Yeah, I think it'll look a lot like last year for Baltimore, and I think they can get a lot luckier in the playoffs. So that's basically my mentality. And with that, we've gone long enough into the show where it's just me yapping. I want to take a short break, and then when we come back, Yahoo's Nate Tice joins us. I'm super excited for that, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. I am thrilled to introduce the first guest in history. He is a writer and podcaster for Yahoo Sports, Nate Tice. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. First podcaster in history.
First podcast.
It's like the Joe Thomas stat, first offensive lineman in history. That was perfect. I'm
That's
excited.
You.
No,
you're the Joe Thomas. You're the Joe Thomas of guests, man.
Appreciate it. It's sturdy for a losing team.
Oh yeah.
No. It's I appreciate that as a fellow Wisconsin Badger. That's great. No, happy to be here, Theo. I'm pretty fired up. 2 Minnesotans.
That's right.
On one pod that don't live in Minnesota.
Do you consider yourself Minnesotan? I'm not sure how long you were there. You have a lot of lore.
I do have a lot of lore. I appreciate that in my own head too. I moved there when I was 7, and so second grade to high school. But I spent a lot of time still in Seattle, like in summers and stuff, which is where I'm originally from. I consider myself more Seattle-ish than Minnesotan, but I still think there's a little Minnesotan Midwestern in me, obviously. And then I went to Wisconsin, so that helps. But my parents are from New York, so that's a whole oil and water situation going on in there. So yeah, there's I kind of got a little bit of mix of America in there, but yeah, I consider myself a little bit more Seattleite than Minnesotan.
Okay. Well,
what about you? Because you ended up in the Southwest as well.
Yeah, it's good for me to go over my whole life story here on the first episode, actually. So I appreciate the ask. I consider myself 100% Minnesotan, really. Okay. Like I was born there. I spent elementary school, middle school, high school there, and then I went to Arizona State for college. So that's where the Southwest comes in. But I only lived in Phoenix for 3 years. I dropped out of ASU. So, and then I moved to Flagstaff. And then now I'm in Denver, Colorado. So I've got to stay somewhere at least like 10 years before it like surpasses the Minnesota in me.
I get that. Well, you're spread. You've gotten further away than a lot of Minnesotans. Like
It's true.
a lot of them stay there in the Twin Cities. So you've done more outside living than a lot do.
I'm getting closer and closer. I went from Minneapolis or near Minneapolis to Phoenix, and then Flagstaff's a little bit closer.
And then Colorado is
Denver's a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Lincoln, Nebraska is my next. Lincoln, Nebraska is my next stop, and then Des Moines,
Kansas
and then I'll be back.
St. Louis, Iowa. Yep. You'll be
and
all
then
the way
I'll be
up there.
back.
That's perfect.
But anyway, I've brought you on because I spent the first half of the episode talking about who I think the best team in each conference will be, or a Super Bowl prediction, however you want to say it. And then I wanted to bring you on to kind of broaden the scope of the teams we could talk about, and just talk about some teams that aren't the best right now. And we would never say that they are, but we are really excited about potential. And usually there isn't a ton of turnover at the top of the league year after year, but if there is a team that makes a Cinderella run to the Super Bowl, we'll be on record calling it right here, right now. So I'm thinking one AFC dark horse, one NFC dark horse team. And I will throw to you first.
Okay.
What is a surprise team in the AFC that you believe can make?
AFC.
Yeah, we'll go AFC first.
Okay.
That you believe can make a deep run.
A deep run. Okay, that makes it better. I have a better NFC team that I feel even more wholehearted about. I believe that's a good way to put it. But if I'm going like true dark horse can truly be a curveball, and I don't really fully believe this, but maybe win a playoff game, make playoffs and win a playoff game. I will go that far, is the Colts. And I'm going to Indianapolis Colts. And that is, they're kind of originally I've kind of said they're a dark horse to win their division, but we'll go a step further to maybe even win a playoff game or two. It's more based on their offense. I think we all know what the defense could be. It's Gus Bradley. Defense is kind of, I think it's going to be okay. It'll be better than it's been, but I think it's just more okay. The DB room's a little, but the front seven's interesting. And I like that the Latu pick more than I would at other teams. I liked him for the Colts because of all the other guys they have with size, and he's kind of like a different flavor. So I like the front. Always been a fan of Buckner, Grover, all those guys, but offense is what I'm stoked. Shane Steichen, awesome. Love his stuff. He plays the hits and they're great, and does it in his own way. A lot different flavor than a lot of the Shanahan guys. He's just a totally different tree, more of a Norv Turner attack, which I really appreciate. And Anthony Richardson, I'm super bullish on that. I just think he's, I've said dark horse for MVP. More of as a betting thing because it's 31, 33 to 1, somewhere around there. I think he's just going to improve leaps and bounds. Maybe next year is where he truly makes that superstar leap, but I think we're going to see a lot of flashes this year. Just have to stay healthy, but I think he is. I think he just got he got it out of the way. But the flashes we've seen and just the more polish than I think he's been advertised as a prospect. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but as a prospect and then now as a pro, even if you can point at completion percentage all you want, but the high end stuff that he does is what you want. And he's so young. I think he's just going to be I think he's going to have a lot of star moments this year. And I think he's going to help lead them. I think the run game's going to be fantastic. I like the receivers. I like AD Mitchell. Maybe not come on till maybe the second half of the year, maybe not till next year, but he's different than what they've had. I think it's they're my team for the AFC.
They're my team as well. I wrote them down as AFC favorites or dark horse favorites, not AFC favorites. But
who are your favorites, by the way?
So my favorites are the Ravens in the AFC.
Okay.
And the Packers in the NFC.
Okay. Well, Packers are going to be my NFC dark horse because I thought because I have just
a dark horse as the overall favorite, but we'll get into that.
I have more I could throw in there.
Okay, perfect. Well, we can talk about both then. We'll talk about both. But for the Colts, I absolutely love the pick. I feel like I'm glad you said the Colts because I feel like I'm going to have like Sean McVay recall when talking about them because I've watched all the Anthony Richardson games so many times and there's really not that many of them. And the potential here is so tantalizing. With Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, Taylor only had one carry last year with Richardson under center. And the combined potential of putting them both in for a full season is completely mouthwatering.
Exactly.
Taylor in 7 starts last year had 661 yards in the games he was healthy enough to start, 4.8 yards per carry. I think he still has plenty of juice, even though he's been banged up. And the thing about this offense that I love so much is just the easy things that just keep you on schedule have so much explosive potential with the Colts. Like everything could be explosive.
It really, that's it. I love that you brought up the Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson stat that we did our top 10 offenses pod on our first episode on a new show for Yahoo. And I was looking at the run game and the stats. I was like, I thought the stats would be a little worse than they actually were as far as the underlying stats, but they're 8th in rushing DVOA and 13th in EPA per early down rush. And that was with Gardner Minshew and Zach Moss. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's not Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor taking the chunk of those. And I think even guys like Evan Hull coming back, he's a fun little kind of third down back from, he got hurt last year, but he's from Northwestern. I like him as a compliment to Taylor. I like the tight ends. So it's just, I think what you said is perfect is that they do a lot of the simple stuff really well, but it's just that they have that chance to be turbocharged. And that's what the Eagles were on their Steichen too. It was just simple stuff, but it was just like they had such explosive talent, and it might be just a different configuration here with the Colts. I think you've even seen early whispers so far is that like the Colts run game just looks like fantastic. And so I think the offensive line's improved. So I think, good pick us.
Yeah. Good
way to go.
I like to lean into teams that aren't going to take a lot of sacks and will get a lot of sacks. Yeah. Like people talk about interception differential or turnover differential all the time.
It's yards.
Sack differential is to me the main thing to look at. And the other thing about this rushing offense is like Shane Steichen leans on it, but he's not dumb. Like they were 6th in run rate on first down last year. So they were committing to it, but they were 27th in run rate on second and long. Like he's not stubborn, right? Like when they get behind the sticks, they're still going to be fine. And I love Josh Downs. I think that guy is always open. But there was some really promising stuff like on option routes, against the blitz, Richardson finding him like kind of telepathically, like really early last year. So another year of growth from him. Yeah, I completely agree with you that this team could be a little Eagles-esque. So they've got to be the pick. But moving on to the NFC.
Okay.
I've got to talk to you about the Green Bay Packers. And I just want to hear you talk about them for a while because I've already talked about them at this point in the episode.
I'd love to. My theory is more the offense and young guys get better. And even if that's really it, I think Jordan Love's fantastic. I went on, I was on Mina Kimes' show. We did the quarterback draft and I picked him 5th. I stand by that because I just think even before his high end stuff that he showed in the second half of last year in the playoffs, there's moments in the first half that I was like, hey, this guy's doing some stuff. Like they help him out. They don't run a lot of play action, kind of simplify it. But even as the season went along and the rookies and the young players stopped messing up so much, they kind of started asking everybody to do a little bit more. And then that's where you could see the rapid improvement from him being Jordan Love and the rest of the offense. I mean, pick a receiver to be excited about. Like they have several guys. Pick your flavor you like. I'm personally a Jaden Reed guy. But Dontavian Wicks is the hipster favorite right now. Christian Watson has his favorites. Some people like him as well. I think he's going to be kind of a super role, kind of like a design play perfecto guy. But I think he does a lot of things well, but I don't know. He's just a unique mover. I don't know if he gets playing receiver yet. But then I think just also the tight ends I like. Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. They have offensive line that I thought it was above average. People are finding an issue with that. I like their offensive line. I like the depth of it. Maybe it's not star laden, but I think it's at least above board. Yeah. And I think the run game will be good because they design it really well. Josh Jacobs is, they just need health there. Last year they struggled in the run game because they had no healthy running backs other than plotting AJ Dillon. Which is, as Justice Mosqueda likes to call, Plodzilla. But yeah, I love the offense. I think the defense is just going to be improved by subtraction. I hate to be mean to him because he actually is a nice guy, but Joe Barry I just think the new defensive coordinator, even if he's inexperienced, I'm curious of what they're going to do. It's a different flavor. I think it suits their personnel decently. Again, they have young players there. There's you can go from old players like Kenny Clark is cool, but then they have guys like Carl Brooks and Wyatt. They have different flavors. They have Rashawn Gary. They have the linebackers are interesting. I'll call them that. And I actually think the DB group's pretty good too. Cause it's just kind of, they're day 3 guys and Valentine and Stokes. Hopefully he's back healthy. Jairus hopefully more healthy. So I don't know. I just think this team is young. I think they do a lot. They're really well coached on offense, which I think is very important. They have a quarterback that can do shit. So not sure what swearing rules are on the spot, but
I'm not either. I guess they're allowed.
All right, well, you can beep it. I'm sorry, but they do stuff. Yeah, so I'm very, very high on the Packers. I think they are a Final Four-esque team more than a like surprise playoff team. Like I'm pretty high on them.
Oh yeah, I think they could maybe not easily win the conference because nothing's easy, but they're in that tier. I don't know if I've ever seen a team this deep, and I haven't been doing this that long, but I mean, every single position group is insane, except for quarterback, which could be an issue. But the wide receiver, the only other wide receiver room that I can remember like this is the Packers, like in 2011 when they had Jordy, Driver, Jennings, Cobb, James Jones. Like they were legitimately 5 deep. It's very rare that you see that. And even though they didn't have an all-pro, like they don't have CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson, who do you game plan on for? Right. Like who do you key in on? There's no way to do it. And whoever your weakest player is going to be going up against someone who's way better than them. And then, like you said, they're well coached. LaFleur is just one of those guys. I have a theory that LaFleur, McVay, and Shanahan are the new Big Ben, Manning, Brady. Since I had a stat that I have already said, but I'll say it to you as well because I like it. But from 2001 to 2018, there were 36 teams that played in the AFC Championship round. Okay. Exactly 24 of those were quarterbacked by Roethlisberger, Brady, or Manning. So that's 2/3 on the dot. Since 2018, there have been 12 teams to play in the NFC Championship game. 8 of those 12 have been coached by Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, or Matt LaFleur. So it's the exact same percentage so far. Like these guys are just there year in and year out. So I don't know why I would predict a Matt LaFleur offense to regress. I know people like that's the number one thing that people are worried about with the Packers is like regression. They were so bad for one half. They were so good for the second half. What half is the real them? But when they're so young and they have a coach this good, it's probably the second half. And Love, like when you're a great quarterback when you're manipulating, or you have a great one on your hands when you're manipulating time and space is really what it comes down to. If you can look people off and get the defense to move yards with just a glance, or you hold it for just that extra second, like with Love on his back foot because he can throw it there. Like he can just kind of stand in there just an extra second and kind of fade away. He's really manipulating the fabric of the game, I feel like the great ones do. And I just don't think that's going anywhere.
Right. It's showing improve. But right. Yeah. The early half issues were a lot of mental mistakes. And that's why I think I'm buying that it's the second half is that it's not like the guys forget it. Like it's not, they make the mistake, they approve. That usually what happens is they add layers to it. That's the new baseline. So that's where that's why I think I'm buying the more high end side on this that we saw in the second half and then the playoffs, second half of the year and then the playoffs. That Cowboys game, the wild card game was the magnum opus. But I just think that's why it's not physical limitations. It's just mental mistakes that got cleaned up, I thought. So again, and I mean, I even didn't even talk about they added Jordan Morgan from Arizona, who I was really high on this draft, actually. But they're bumping him right inside the guard. And I actually think that's the right call. They're going to give him a chance to start. They'll figure out the right 5. They have depth at offensive line, which a lot of teams don't. They have, like you just mentioned, you mentioned the receivers. This team just has depth. Might not be the highest end A's and A pluses or even A minuses, but having a lot of B's is good. As somebody that got a lot of B's, good. Like that, so it works out. But I just think that, they just have what a lot of teams don't. We'll talk about the kickers at a later date. But yeah, I think they're built for success in this year. They're not a 14-win team, but I think this is a good, strong, like 11-win team that's going to have a nice offense.
Progression isn't always linear, but when they're so young, it might be. Like it's just so cut and dry. Like they were young, they made a lot of stupid mistakes, and then they figured it out, and now they're better. Like
it might not be 20% better, but one might go 20% better, one might get 2% better, but it's all positive percentage as opposed to physical limitations.
I guess I'll ask you this: if do you think the 49ers have gotten substantially weaker to beat if the Packers match up with them again in the playoffs? I know this is a different conversation.
No, it's fine. I still feel good about the offense. I'm tired of pulling my hair out about McKivitz and all these other things that don't matter in the regular season. We'll talk about in the playoffs. I'm tired of talking about Purdy's ranking. I don't care. They're going to have a good offense. It's just physics. It's just Kyle Shanahan and physics and the weapons that they have. But as far as their defense, I do think the defense is going to take a little drop. Charles McDonald and I talked about their defenses today, and we kind of both came to the same conclusion that it's like, but they still have the stars. They still have Travarius Ward. They still have Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw. They still have Nick Bosa. They still have, Hargrave. They still have a lot of high end guys. The defensive system we'll see. But one of the weaknesses I thought that they shored up on that I liked was they signed Devondre Campbell, which is just, a minor signing. Mm-hmm. But last year, this defense stunk when they had to have 3 linebackers on the field, and that's how they wanted to play. And they also were kind of doing some third down things that weren't groovy, a lot of man coverage, and kind of like it was weird. I think maybe that just with the new defensive play caller, maybe they kind of just revert back to truly what they are. But I just think they still have the horses to that they're the top team. Even if I just want something different, it's just kind of what they do. They have talent. They have stars. They don't just have talent. They it's different than the Packers, who are a bunch of B's and B pluses, maybe some A minuses. It's like, the 49ers have some C's and C minuses, but they have A's and A pluses at a lot of spots too. A lot of important spots.
Yeah. I want to predict them to fall off a little bit, but there's one move that's like completely preventing me from saying it. And it's such a little move that I don't know if it should, but they traded for Malik Collins to replace Eric Armstead. I'm like, that was such a good little signing from them to remain disruptive and like,
right.
I just don't know the front four. But we'll see. We'll see. The loss of Chase Young, I think, is a little bit underrated for them. Like Chase Young is an easy guy to hate on, it feels like, on Twitter and stuff. But they'll feel that loss.
But he's still like a positive player. Yeah. Like I know that's the thing. Sometimes the guys that might not be a superstar, but they're still like impactful and help out to have. Yeah. I think last year they got caught a little bit against teams that wanted to run on them, and teams that could play bully ball a little bit with them. Just they have lighter bodies in the back end. They want to gap shoot. They want to shoot up the field, and that can get caught by good run teams. You saw in the Packers in the divisional round a little bit. I think they're going to try and shore that up. And I don't know. They can get after the passer. They're going to play with leads. So it's like, it's one of those where it's like, yeah, they might not have the best defense, but I don't see them being worse than 12th. I think I had them 7th. I think in our rankings, or 6th. And I think that was a good kind of midway point, like a literal midway point to those. If there's another team in that, the Rams offense is kind of, I'm excited about. Defense, not so much. I am excited about the Cardinals. I'm excited about the NFC West in general.
I was going to say an NFC West team, and it's the one you haven't said yet.
It's the Seahawks. Yes. This is what I was getting to. I was holding up the curtain, but it was NFC West is very, very interesting to me. Cardinals, I think, are really cool and funky. I don't think they're going to be great, but I think they're going to be like a really fun 7-8 win team that's going to give a lot of team issues. I just really excited to watch it. But then the Seahawks, that was actually my other dark horse contender. I had Colts, Packers, and Seahawks written down. So
we know ball because that's the exact 3.
Okay.
But that's good.
But when you look at it, it just makes sense.
It just makes sense. Why would I pick a team less talented? Like,
I'm not going to pick the Saints.
I'm not going to pick the Saints. I'm not going to.
No. Who else we got there? Not the Giants. Cowboys can't be called a dark horse. I actually think they're the other end. Eagles can't be called a dark horse. Commanders, I don't think are making the playoffs. Bears, maybe like that, but that a contender. That's more like a playoff team. Like, like maybe a 9-win team. I think their defense rocks. Lions, no. Vikings, are that borderline playoff team, but no. And that's, and the NFC South is just the NFC South. So, yeah. So you just kind of narrow it down from there.
Yep. It really does leave us with the Seahawks. And I'm running back a take that aged poorly a year ago where I was like, the Seahawks are so set up for success. They're going to be so good. And then they just weren't. They missed the playoffs. And now I'm just running it back. But I think it's fine to run it back because Geno Smith did not regress. Despite what the numbers say, he was still awesome last year. Basically every game you watch him, highlighted by the Steelers game at the end of the year. Like if you have any reservations about Geno or think that he's, a 1-year flash in the pan, like watch that game. He was doing all the same stuff that made the Seahawks make the playoffs back in 2022. So they still got him. JSN came on strong towards the end of the year. They still got Lockett. They still got DK. The line, it might I just think it will magically get better. I just do. Maybe you can articulate why better than me, but
no, it's I'm with you. I like the receivers still, even if I'm not particularly high on any of them. Their collection of them is very good. The tight end, with Noah Fant's actually come on a little bit as just an all around player. He's not going to be a star, which I maybe thought he had the upside of, but I think he's a good, solid tight end now. And they drafted AJ Barner from Michigan. Nice, dirty work guy who's going to replace Colby Parkinson. So I actually like that fit there. So the offensive line, though, the offense always has to come back to the offensive line because that's what the entire 2023 Seahawks season was limited by. Offensive line injuries and inconsistencies.
Yeah, they had 10 different iterations, I think it was.
The interior is a mess. Yeah. It was just the right tackle was a mess. Both tackles. I'm still high on Charles Cross, the left tackle. I think he has star potential. I don't think he's near there, but as a rookie, he looked good. And so last year he did not. He looked very not good. And so I think that he's going to play more like as a rookie. They brought Laken Tomlinson, who's fine. But it's an improvement, it's just someone steady. I'm curious who they're going to go with. Oluwatimi or Timi from Michigan. I'm curious because I liked him as a kind of a day 2, day 3 guy coming out of college. So I'm just curious how he plays. But I really like the Christian Haynes pick, who they drafted in the 3rd round. Really like him. He was a top 35 player for me in this draft. And then hopefully Abe Lucas is healthy. But it's better than it was. They have some more depth than they had. I like the back pairing, even if Walker is kind of way up and down because he's just chaos. I like Zach Charbonnet a lot. The defense, I think, is going to improve by play caller. I think the personnel is going to be more cohesive this year. So I think the defense is just going to improve by that. And actually just not having Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams out there, who were negatives for him last year. They really were. And so I think that now, just by those additions by subtraction, I think that this team is better than I think people think. That's where I'm at with the Seahawks. It's like this team's kind of getting a little slept on a little bit.
Yeah, you mentioned the play caller. Waldron is in Chicago now, which I'm fascinated by. They bring in Ryan Grubb. I think a big problem that they had last year was on 3rd down. That's when they really got their teeth kicked in. Was right. 3rd down and long. They were horrifically bad on 3rd down, and what they did was just go mega wide on 3rd down. I think they had the widest formations in the league on 3rd. And I think they were so wide that they had the widest formations in the league overall last season. So if you can condense a little bit more and help out the tackles or whoever you need to help out with extra bodies, auxiliary bodies, I could see Grubb doing a little bit more of that than Waldron did. And that combined with just it can't possibly get worse makes me think the line, I think it will be a little bit better. And then the defense, I'm so excited about this defense with McDonald. Draymond Jones, Byron Murphy, Jerron Reed, Leonard Williams, Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, Darrell Taylor. What a front. That is deep. That is going to be maximized by their defensive coordinator. Again, I think this team is going to get a lot of sacks, and I think we'll see taking them on the other side, but Geno Smith can avoid them. So they kind of fit that same mold.
Yeah, no, I love your kind of your sack differential point, sack yardage differential. But that's the Richardson thing too, right? He doesn't take a lot of yards on his sacks, which again, he's better than people realize. But with the Seahawks is they have kind of a weird personnel grouping. The front is not a particular type. It's a mishmash of parts. But that works for McDonald. Yes. Because that's what his defense is. It's kind of a little bit of everything. It's a smorgasbord. So I think that's what I've gotten more excited as I've kind of pieced that together. I think it's funny that anyone says, "Oh, McDonald runs this type of defense," because it's just
changes.
He runs everything. He literally runs everything. It's a kaleidoscope scheme. I think that's the fancy term I came up with for my articles. It's truly a little bit of everything. And the fact that they have guys like Devin Witherspoon, who is a difference maker, he's going to weaponize him. He's his Kyle Hamilton. That's cool. He already has that a very essential role for them. The linebackers are different for him. He has no Roquan, but I think just the pieces that they have up front are better overall than even what the Ravens had. I know that's weird to say, but I actually do like just the whole piece than they had last year. And I think the back end's just interesting and kind of funky. And I think that the funkiness works. So yeah, I've talked myself into it. They even have a good punter. Like, just little things like that, and the schedule's not as bad, I believe. Like there's just like a lot of little things to like about them. And I'm kind of with you. That's like I bought a little, I was kind of like middle ground with them. I was a middle ground plus with them last year. And I think I'm there again this year, but I actually feel even better, which is weird to say. And because of what they're kind of hyped up as last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was the reason for that. I was like, dude, the Seahawks could win the Super Bowl, guys. And then just horrible. Yeah.
I think I have top 10 offense. And I think I was like, I never got there with the defense because I saw Bobby Wagner. And then, but it was just that, but now I'm kind of better. I like to play caller better, obviously, but I thought it wasn't that great anyway. So now you're going from a negative to what I think could maybe be a plus. That's just a big, improvement jump for a unit.
Yeah. And I like their safeties more than I kind of thought that I did looking at their roster. Now they lost Adams, they lost Diggs, but Julian Love he just got extended. Like we'll see if he lives up to that. But Rayshon Jenkins was a nice pickup, I think.
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
I was watching him because I was watching the Colts earlier and he had kind of a nice game in that week 1 thing. Like he can come down and hit and do everything you need a safety to do. And I still am holding out hope for Reek Woolen. Like he was just so unbelievable as a rookie, I thought, except for that. And then he got put in the Shanahan blender and I was like, maybe it was just
it happens. It happens.
It happens to the best of us. And then he just didn't really make it back. So, but we'll see. Yeah. It's a brutal division.
It is.
I like what you said that every team is dangerous. Like I'm 100% positive the Cardinals offense is going to be good. Like I am too.
I'm trying to drag people there. I'm trying to drag people into like what understand. They're good. Like Kyler's better than people are forgetting Kyler. I think Kyler's matured. Yes. Just as a player on the field, he looks more mature. And I think they're asking him to be more mature and he's answering. And I just think the personnel, they did a lot with not a lot last year. And I think now they have much better personnel on both sides, but I think the offense, I didn't put them in my top 10 when we did that show, but they're like my one that I kind of wanted to sneak in there because I'm pretty stoked to see what they do. And the defense is funky, which I think is fun.
The thing about the Cardinals that I like so much is like when I watched them last year, there was just no boundary threat at all. Like they had Hollywood Brown, but I didn't think Kyler was even really looking at him. And when he did, he would like fail him on some deep shot. And eventually Kyler was like, okay, I'm ignoring the outside, which just makes no sense for Kyler. Like he's hyper focused on the middle of the field. That's bad for Kyler. Like you should have that boundary threat be like leading the league if you have Kyler Murray. And that wasn't there at all for them last year, which you would think would like destroy the whole offense.
Yeah.
But it didn't. Like there were a couple times where it's like he couldn't find the throwing lane and mistakes would happen. But overall, like he piloted a structured offense very well, despite the fact that he was asked to perform his weakest trait, really. So I think he'd be more under center in one game than he probably ever was in high school, college, and as a pro combined. Yes.
Like last year, it was that, and it's kind of cool. I thought it was really cool to watch Kyler's. You can see the maturation on the field. Like as he was playing, it was kind of cool. They were asking him to do more like real quarterback stuff. And it wasn't always great. Like there's, like you mentioned, there's like, he missed some stuff and like it wasn't always like perfect. He was more average-ish, but it was like, I think this is going to pay dividends. Trey McBride rocks. Those two have great chemistry. Paris Johnson Jr. is awesome. I think the run game is going to be really cool. The tight ends overall are fun. And then James Conner and Trey Benson are pretty cool. Benson's really explosive, and I think that's going to be really fun in this run game. And then I just think I've been fascinated that they might go 3 tight ends with Tip Ryman.
I love Tip Ryman.
Yeah. And then have Marvin Harrison Jr. as the lone receiver and kind of make their defenses pick their poison.
When Tip Ryman went in the 3rd round, I got up and danced around. I loved his blocking film so much, and he did such a good job at the combine in a tight end class where there was just no blocking to be found. Like I was like, dude, Tip Ryman is by is like the second. Like I don't care. I'm betting on those tools. He was my second favorite in the whole class. And when he went day call. 2 with no receiving production, I was like, someone loves him. Someone is going. And it was the Cardinals who were gonna put him out there. I'm so excited about him. Do you have any opinion on the guard that they drafted out of Illinois? Because
Isaiah Adams, that's his name, right?
But right.
He sucked as a tackle, and he was pretty good as a guard. I think their whole third round was the run game. It was Adams, Trey Benson, and Tip Ryman, and that was the run game right there. I think it's a nice. I think he's going to be a nice, solid starter. I don't know great. But I'll go out there. I wasn't as high on him as most, maybe because I only dove into a couple of 2022 games. But I kind of I'm trusting people that maybe that's going to be his best spot, and that he'll probably be better than maybe I'm giving him credit for. Okay. So I think he's more solid. I think Paris Johnson Jr., like I said, is already awesome. I think the center, Froholt.
I'm not even going to try the first. It's like
he's fun.
Halte. Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. He's fun, and the O-line coach is good. So that just combined with kind of the additions that they made, I think it's just a nice little combination for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole NFC West is a dark horse. So because the Rams are good as well, I think that they did an okay job replacing Donald in the aggregate with Fisk and Verse. It's fine. I know. Fisk in the second round is really high for me, but it's like I love Kobe Turner so much that like all 4 spots are like kind of accounted for. But
yeah, because they have Byron Young. I know that's where I'm at with there. I think it's gonna be a lot of shootouts. It's gonna be a lot of 27-30s, a lot of 31-24s. Yeah, I think in LA, which is gonna be fun again. Yeah. Yeah, Cardinals Rams could be a lot juicier of a matchup than people realize right now. Yeah,
I agree. But the Seahawks are the real complete team to watch out for in the NFC as a dark horse. Colts in the AFC.
Love it.
I agree. I think that those we'll see if it comes true because on paper I just don't know what could go wrong. Really, it's outside of major injury. It just looks so good. But
well, that is just a hard jinx. That is just what could go wrong?
What could go wrong outside of injury? They're just so talented, man. Good
Murphy
fronts, good quarterbacks, good weapons. Like that's all you need, right?
God, right? Oh yeah. This is all just gonna come collapsing down. Trust me, as a guy that was super high in the Atlanta Falcons last year, this is nothing can ever go wrong.
You know, they didn't have pass rush or
and the
proven
team, man.
Well, I guess the Colts don't have proven quarterback play either, but
yeah, way more talented than Desmond Ridder, even if I liked Ridder. Yeah, we'll see. None of my takes ever blow up in my face. We'll see how the Drake May take goes too. That's gonna be a good one. Good one to keep an eye on for a little bit.
That one's going to age great. That one's so far so good. What is even happening?
So far so good. I got plenty of net throws. Plenty of I just want everyone to know that every quarterback does bag drills. Every single quarterback since high school on. So those aren't just special for somebody's footwork or anything. Mm-hmm. I just want to throw that out there real quick.
Do you scour Twitter for the training camp clips this time of year, or are you just kind of take them as they come?
I take them as they come. I follow, or if I'm like in a group chat and they're like, "Did you see that thing?" and I'll maybe like search for something. But usually I follow enough accounts that are the ones retweeting all of it or quote tweeting it, so that I see them. Like I think today I saw Justin Fields like clip as he's running away from a blitz. It was like typical, and I so like that I quote tweeted that. Like it just says, but it's not someone I follow or anything, or someone else retweeted or something. So
do you care about them? Do you like break them down and like try to glean any information, or are you just like, damn, that was
only little tiny kernels if I'm trying to see something. Okay. Like today, the Drake May was doing quick game under center, and I thought that was more funny because that's the Aaron Rodgers slant flat play. That was the play on the clip that I quoted. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but that's what the play was. So I thought it was really funny that Van Pelt was running it because him and McCarthy are boys. So that was kind of one that maybe kind of, but not really. That's more like for jokes and everything, or just little like observations, not because. Preseason's going to tell you a little bit, but even that is hard. It's just hard because you're going to see the most maybe in cross training cross practices, but then you're not going to have cameras on those. So, and everybody kind of looks good in shorts. So it's a long-winded way to say, not really. I don't take much. I just take little like jokes or little things I can find for 15 Twitter likes.
I'm going to try to get you to say something reckless as long as we're talking about AFC dark horses and Drake May.
Oh, no.
Patriots win over under 7.5. What would you take?
Oh, dang it. Because I've been saying they could win 7 games. Slight over.
I agree.
Slight over.
I agree.
I think they could win 8. That defense, the people don't realize how good that defense is, and I think the offense is going to be okay. So, yeah, don't think it's going to be that bad.
Okay. Well, I think that'll do it for the Nate Tice segment, the first guest segment on the show. It was great. Thank you so much for coming on, Nate.
Thanks for having me, dude. No, as someone that just started my own pod, this is I feel you right now. So yeah, congratulations.
Yes, go listen.
Best of luck.
Go listen to Nate's pod. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I know 301 is in the name.
Yeah, that's all you need to know.
301.
It's something about football and it's something about 301. So it's football 301. So there we go. Yeah, but no, check it out. Me, Charles McDonald, Matt Harmon from Reception Perception. It's good.
Amazing.
It's been pretty fun. Thank you. No, you too. Good luck. It's gonna be fun.
Thank you. Well, I think that just about does it for this first episode of Your Football Opinion. I've been your host, Theo Ash. It has been real. If you loved the episode or even liked the episode or thought it was decent, be sure to hit that subscribe button and you can hear all the future episodes. And if you really liked it, leave a review. And if you thought there were some things that I can improve upon, which I'm sure there are, because this is the pilot, leave a comment. And I will read them, take them into account, and this show will get better and better and better as the 2024 season rolls on until it's just the best damn football podcast out there. So, again, can't thank you all enough for listening. Another big thank you to Nate Tice for being a guest on this first episode. And yeah, that's all I got to say. Tune in next week.